Last week, Kirby Smart basically came out and admitted finally that Carson Beck was the leader for the Georgia QB1 race. And, that's a little bit atypical of him. Over the course of these years, you go through it where he's been where he's been the head coach of Georgia. How many times has there been, unless it was just completely obvious, how many times has he given an inclination? Has there been an official inclination of who the starting quarterback is going to be heading into the season? 2022 was clearly Stetson Bennett, and honestly, 2021 it was clearly JT Daniels. Brought him to SEC Media Days. So, there is a misconception about 2021. Heading into 2021, there was a choice. It was JT Daniels. The choice changed, right, when he gets hurt and when Stetson does his thing. Heading into 2020, obviously that was not the case. Heading into 2018, it was kind of a silent, yes, it's Jake Fromm. Heading into 2016, his original year, the assumption and the reporting is that it'll be Jacob Eason. He ends up, coming in just after the beginning of the season and the game. But Carson, this is what he said about Carson Beck last week. He's certainly the leader, but hasn't done enough to say he's the starter. Do you really expect much else from Kirby other than, he's gonna, he's a leader, but he hasn't done anything. The likelihood that Beck gets announced as the starter anywhere before a couple days before the game, if not the actual day of the game or the first drive of the game, I'd be surprised if there is some sort of official announcement. It just doesn't happen that much with some of these off-season QB competitions. So, Carson, last season, 2022, he's the QB2 all season long. He's Stetson Bennett's backup. In backup reps, in actual game time, he threw in 5 different games, including the national championship against TCU. He had attempts in 5 games. And in those 5 games, he put together a stat line that the stat line of what would be one really good game. 26 for 35, 74% completion percentage, 310 yards, and 4 touchdowns. In his moments in 2022, he looked sharp against backup defenses for the most part, right? He looks sharp. You definitely understand it with Beck, and he... to me, he showed why he was the backup quarterback, right? And I'll explain a little bit more what I mean by that. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post here, talking about Carson Beck in the 2023 quarterback situation. We talk about the quarterbacks a lot on here. And make sure, real quick, I'm in the middle of moving. I'm in the next week or two. I'm going to have different backdrops. I'm going to have different scenes around me. So be patient. I do not have it in front of me. But Double Dogs Preview Magazine. Links are down below for that. Carson, he was a COVID baby, right? Let's call him that. He was a COVID recruit, that 2020 class. The 21 class was the real COVID class, right? But he was the one that came in during COVID. So COVID recruit in a different sense. And look, I think he's going to have a hell of a year. Just to be quite frank with you, the closer we get to this, the more I think, man, I just think Carson Beck's going to be a really good quarterback for the Georgia Bulldogs this year. I think he's going to be a one-and-done starter and go to the NFL. Is he going to be a first-round pick? Maybe. I think that there are definitely other quarterbacks that are going to get drafted ahead of him unless he just goes berserk. Caleb Williams, Drake May, guys like that. Quinn Ewers obviously ranked highly. But I think Carson Beck's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC and the country. Look, when we got to vote, the SEC Media Days, we get emailed the poll at the end of it on Wednesday night or Thursday morning of SEC Media Days. All of the media who attended or all the media who was credentialed, you get emailed your poll, projected order of finish for each division and projected SEC champion, and you get to vote on essentially first and second for the most part, and third string preseason teams. And look, there's a flaw in the voting. You don't get to vote for certain players. What it seemed like to me was you couldn't vote for players that were not returning starters or returning, highly involved players, and Carson Beck's obviously not one of them. I've really thought about making Carson Beck my SEC QB2. Thought about it, right? So the consensus seems to be Jalen Daniels and KJ Jefferson, or whatever order you want to put, are the top two quarterbacks in the SEC. Look, heading into last year, I told you how I felt about KJ Jefferson. I thought last year he was heading into it. I thought he was the fifth best quarterback in the country. I think if I go back and look at the Dawg Post TikTok, I believe that's what I put. And he, right? I mean, is that not roughly what he was? But Stetson gone, Hendon Hooker gone, Bryce Young gone, Will Levis gone. The four guys that I had ranked ahead of him, FYI, they're all gone. So, right, this easy consensus is, well, he and Jalen Daniels, they can, or Jaden Daniels. Ooh. Wow. You're just watching me blank on what his first name is. The Daniels quarterback of LSU. Wow. That was some real life memory loss there. So there's an assumption. But KJ, so I felt forced to pick them, right? Because I didn't think it was going to be Will Rogers or Jackson Dart or Joe Milton, right? Some of those other guys. So I almost felt forced to pick KJ and Jaden Daniels as my top two SEC quarterbacks. And it was like that. There were some other positions where I wanted to put some guys. I wanted to put Dominic Lovett, to be quite frank with you. I think Dominic Lovett has potential to be a good year. I considered putting him on ballot. Well, guess what? He wasn't even on the ballot, right? And he stayed in the SEC. He was one of the best SEC receivers last year, right? Flaw with the voting. So that's how I feel about Carson Beck. I was a little bit of a tangent, but that's how I feel about Carson Beck. I feel that he is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC and one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Something that no one talks about with him. They talk about all these weapons. No matter who's going to be the starting quarterback for Georgia, they're going to have the weapons around them. True, right? Bowers, Arian Smith, Milton, whoever you want to consider his best weapons. Lab McConkey, right? What he also has is a supporting cast that he's been around for a long time. He entered the UGA with Kendall Milton, with Arian Smith, with Marcus Jackson. That 2020 class, all right, there are a lot of guys on that offense. Cedric Van Pran, right? Isn't Cedric Van Pran in the 2020 class? Let's confirm that. But I think there's a lot of important... Oh my goodness, I just want to figure out Cedric Van Pran. A lot of important players from the... Oh my goodness, all these pop-ups. There we go. 2020, I was right. I should just went with my gut. A lot of the important players from the 2020 class are still around, and they're going to play with Carson Beck. Nazir Stackhouse told me in 2020. I'm sorry, I'm trying to pull this up for you guys because it's a new point I want to make, and I want to get it right. Here we go. So who's still around from the 2020 class? Okay, well, your top four recruits are all in the NFL, all right? No secret there. Keely Ringo, Jalen Carter, Broderick Jones, Darnell Washington. But look who's stuck around, who are on this offense with Carson Beck that, look, probably at least a tiny percent sliver is that Carson Beck was also going to be there. Look at this offense. Arian Smith, Jermaine Burton gone. Arian Smith, Tate Ratledge, Cedric Van Pran, Kendall Milton, Marcus Jackson. That's 5. Anybody else? That's all on the offense, but we've got guys on the defense too. Dejan Edwards, there's 6. Devin Willock, man. Rest in peace to Devin Willock. That is an interesting class to look at. I wish I could just pull it up. I know I can. But for Carson, he's got all sorts of guys that he entered his college life with on that offense. I named 6 or 7 right there. You're probably top 2 running backs, right? Unless Branson Robinson really breaks out. The guy who's probably going to get the most of your carries. Seniors. You're a senior, Carson Beck, and you've got the weapons around you and the support around you. So part of the point I was making about that 2022 class, before I realized how many starters from this offense are going to be part of that, is I remember before I did Dawg Post and before I did some other things, and I was just a freshman in college, I had a little college football podcast, and one of the people I interviewed in an episode was Nazir Stackhouse before he ever got at Georgia, and he told me way back when, watch out for Carson Beck. When I was trying to preview, I think, the 2020 season with Nazir Stackhouse before he got to Georgia, and he just told me to watch out for Carson Beck when we were talking about DeJuan Mathis and Stetson Bennett and Jamie Newman at that point. I don't think JT had transferred. This would have been before May of 2020. So it would have been before JT transferred. And I remember talking and asking him about what he thought about Jamie Newman and the quarterback situation at Georgia. Told me not to count out Carson Beck. Look, 3 years later, he's getting his turn and he's got tons more experience this time around. I haven't even talked about him as a football player, as just the 6'4", 200, almost 20-pound guy. Reminds me of Matt Ryan. The zip on the ball, it teleported against Vanderbilt. You see it in practice in all of the moments that I've got to see. He's got the best arm out of him and Brock and Gunner right now. Maybe that'll change, but from what I've seen, it's Carson Beck, and I think he's going to have a hell of a year for Georgia.